The human battle group emerged from hyperspace like thunder giving form. 16 warships led by the massive carrier UES Defiance, and their weapons were already locked onto the Kalori fleet before General Korath could even react. This is Rear Admiral Choi Min-jun of the United Earth Systems Navy. A calm voice announced on all frequencies. You are currently targeting a human colonial installation and one of our rangers. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons before we consider this an act of war. Korath froze with his hands still raised to give the firing order, and Yuna could see the calculation happening behind his eyes as he weighed his options against the reality of human warships that outnumbered and outgunned his fleet. The seconds ticked by in. Silence powered down weapons? Korath finally ordered through gritted teeth. All ships stand by. The tension did not break, but it shifted, transforming from imminent violence into something more complicated. A standoff between two species who had nearly gone to war before and might do so again. Admiral Choi's voice came through again. Still calm, but with an edge of steel beneath the words, General Korath. Your broadcast has been monitored by our entire fleet. We heard your threat against our ranger and the Kalori air. We heard your plan to commit murder to preserve your political narrative. The Galactic Council has also been listening. I suspect they will have questions. Korath said nothing, but his fur had gone pale. Saban stepped forward, still holding the communicator, and spoke with a voice that carried across every frequency. Admiral Choi. This is Crown Heir Sivan of the Kalori Dominion. I thank you for your intervention. The actions of General Korath do not represent the will of my people. A pause. And then the Admiral replied, Your Highness. We heard everything, including your defense of our ranger. Humanity appreciates your words, and your Kara 7 turned to face Korath. And though the air was small and the general was massive, there was no question in that moment who held the power. General Korath. Sivan said formally, I invoke the ancient law of trial by witness. Any Kalori who has seen truth cannot deny it. Millions of our people witnessed this broadcast. They saw what the human did for me. They saw what you tried to do in response. Korath's eyes widened because he knew this law. Everyone knew this law. It was older than the Dominion itself. You cannot invoke that against a military commander. He said desperately, the Council of Elders would never. The Council of Elders is watching right now. Saban interrupted. They heard everything. They witnessed everything, and I call upon them now to judge. A new voice crackled through the communicator, ancient and heavy with authority. This is Elder Matriarch Kaveth of the First Council. We have witnessed, we have judged. General Korath, you are stripped of rank and command effective immediately. You will surrender yourself to Crown Guard custody to await trial for treason against the bloodline. Korath staggered as if physically struck. Furthermore, the Elder Matriarch continued, Crown Heir Sivan is recognized as voice of the throne until formal coronation. Their word is law. Their judgment is final. The general's soldiers moved away from him, and the Crown Guards who had survived the assassin attack stepped forward to take him into custody. It happened so fast that Yuna almost missed it. One moment Korath was the most powerful military figure in the clearing, and the next he was being led away in restraints. Then, suddenly, there were human medics around her. And Sivan was there too, and Yuna felt herself being lifted onto a stretcher. She grabbed Savan's arm before they could take her away. Why? She asked, and her voice was barely a whisper. You could have let him shoot me, and then called for help. You did not have to risk everything. Zaven looked down at her with those golden eyes that glowed with royal light. You asked me the same question when we first met. The heir said, and you told me that you saved me because I was drowning and you were there. Una nodded weakly. Well, Sivan said with something that might have been a smile, you were drowning too. And I was there. The medics took Yuna aboard the Defiance, and the doctors worked on her for hours while diplomats and leaders argued about what would happen next. She slept through most of it. which was probably for the best when she finally woke in the medical bay. Admiral Choi was sitting beside her bed with a cup of coffee in his hand and an expression that mixed respect with disbelief. "Sergeant Beak," he said, "you have caused more diplomatic chaos in one night than my entire fleet has managed in 10 years. Yuna tried to sit up and winced at the pain. "Sorry, Admiral," she said. He laughed and shook his head. "Do not apologize," he said. "You just changed the relationship between humanity and the Kalori forever. The Council of Elders has agreed to open formal peace negotiations. They say it is because of the trial by witness. Because their people saw a human fight for their heir and an heir fight for a human." Paused, and his expression softened. "Savin has been asking to see you," he said. "Something about a promise you made," before Yuna could respond. The door opened and the small Kalori heir slipped inside, still wearing the borrowed clothes the medics had given them. The royal markings glowing softly against spotted for Admiral. Savin said politely, "May I have a moment alone with the Ranger?" Choi stood and bowed, an honor reserved for heads of state. And then he left without another word. Savin approached the bed slowly, and Yuna could see the uncertainty in those alien eyes. "The Council has offered you a formal honor," the heir said. "Guardian of the Crown. It is the highest title a non-Kalori can receive. It would make you a protected member of the royal household for life." Yuna considered this for a moment. "That sounds like a lot of politics," she said. Savin made that coughing laugh sound that Yuna had come to recognize as genuine amusement. "It is," the heir admitted, "but it would also mean we could see each other again. That we could be friends, if you want that." Yuna smiled because she found that she did want that. "Very much. I will accept," she said. "On one condition." The heir tilted their head in curiosity. "You have to learn to swim," Yuna said. "Because I'm not jumping into any more rivers for ya." Savin laughed. A real laugh this time, and the sound was warm and strange and wonderful. 6 months later, on a quiet beach on Verth 7, the crown heir of the Kalori Dominion paddled awkwardly through shallow water while a scarred human ranger stood nearby, calling out instructions and trying not to laugh. Savin went under and came up sputtering, and Yuna waded in to help. And for a moment, they just stood there in the gentle waves, human and Kalori, friends against all odds. The galaxy would later call it the Verath Accords, the first true peace between their species. And historians would write about the political maneuvering and diplomatic genius that made it possible. But those who knew the truth understood that peace had not begun with treaties or trade agreements or careful negotiation. It had begun with something much simpler. Someone was drowning, and a human was there. The Loyalist fleet descended like a storm of metal and light. Dozens of ships surrounding the small ranger station, until the sky itself seemed to disappear behind there. Hull's General Korath was the first to emerge from the command vessel, a massive Kalori with silver fur and scars that told stories of countless battles. And his eyes swept the scene with cold calculation. Yuna watched from where she lay against the boulder, too wounded to move, as the general approached Savin with a bow that seemed more formal than warm. "Your Highness," Korath said in common so that everyone could understand, "we have searched for 3 days. The Dominion rejoices that you live." Savin stood tall, despite the exhaustion that showed in every line of the heir's small body. "General," the heir said, "this human saved my life. She pulled me from the river and fought the assassins alone. She must be given medical care immediately." Korath's eyes moved to Yuna, and something flickered there that made her skin crawl even through the haze of pain. "Of course, Your Highness," the general said smoothly. "We will see to everything." But he made no move to help her, and his soldiers stood in formation without approaching. And Yuna began to understand that something was very wrong. The general turned back to Savin, and his voice dropped lower, though Yuna could still hear every word. "Your Highness, we must discuss what happened here. The implications are complex." "What is there to discuss?" Savin asked. "The assassins are dead, and I am alive thanks to this human. That is precisely the problem," Korath said, and there was no warmth in his voice now. Only cold political calculation. Yuna watched as the general stepped closer to Steven. Looming over the small air with his massive frame, the galaxy cannot know that the crown, heir of the Kalori Dominion, was saved by a human, he said. It would undermine everything we have built. Generations of teaching our people that humans are inferior, primitive, unworthy of respect. Steven stepped back with shock, written clearly across those feline features. You cannot be serious. The heir said, I am completely serious, Your Highness, Korath replied. The Council of Elders has already discussed this matter. The official story will be that loyal Kalari guards saved you from the assassins. The human involvement will be erased, and what of the human herself? Steven asked in a voice that had gone dangerously quiet. Korath did not answer, but his hand moved to the weapon at his side. And that was answer enough, no? Steven said firmly. I forbid this. You are the heir, Your Highness. Korath said with something like pity, but you are not yet the ruler. The council makes these decisions, not you. Yuna laughed, and the sound made everyone turn to look at her. What is amusing human? Korath demanded. You are, Yuna said through teeth gritted against the pain. You really think you can make this disappear? The general's eyes narrowed. You are wounded and alone. He said, your people do not even know you are in danger. There is nothing you can do. Yuna smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. I am a wilderness ranger, General, she said, and when rangers encounter emergency situations, we follow protocol. Which means I have been broadcasting on open channels since the moment those assassins landed. The silence that followed was absolute. Every human colony in the sector heard what happened here. Yuna continued, every Galactic Council frequency. And unless I am mistaken, the Kalori civilian bands as well. She watched the color drain from Korath's silver fur. Millions of people heard me fight your assassins, she said. Millions more heard your heir thank me for saving their life. And right now, millions are hearing you threaten to kill us both to protect your propaganda. Korath spun to his communications officer. Jam all frequencies, he ordered. Now it is too late, General, the officer said with a trembling voice. The broadcast has been running for over an hour. It has already been recorded and shared across the network. Trying to stop it now would only confirm everything. Zaven stepped forward, and there was something new in the heir's bearing. Something that looked almost like a ruler. Give me the communicator, Steven commanded. And the officer handed it over without hesitation. The heir looked at Yuna for a long moment, and something passed between them that did not need words. Then Steven spoke into the communicator, and the words went out to every Kalari who could hear them. People of the Dominion, the heir said, I am Steven of the First Pride, your crown heir, and I speak to you now from a human ranger station on Vareth 7, where I nearly died today. The heir's voice grew stronger with every word. 3 days ago, the Council of Shadows tried to assassinate me, and I fled into the wilderness where I fell into a river and nearly drowned because I never learned to swim. Steven paused, and the glowing markings pulsed with emotion. A human saved me, the heir continued. A human named Yuna Beak, who did not know who I was, who gained nothing from the act, who jumped into dangerous water and risked her life for a stranger of a species that has shown her people nothing but contempt. Korath was frozen, unable to act, unwilling to silence the heir. While the galaxy listened, she asked for nothing. Steven said, she expected nothing, and when assassins came to kill me, she fought them alone. 8 elite warriors against 1 human ranger. And she won. The heir's voice cracked with emotion. I watched a human bleed for me, the heir said, and when the killing blow was about to fall, I took a life to save hers. The first blood I have ever shed, and I would do it again without hesitation. Steven looked directly at General Korath. No, I stand here watching my own people threaten to murder us both to hide the truth. And I ask you, my people, is this who we are? Is this what the Dominion has become? The silence stretched across 1,000 worlds. If the humans are truly inferior, Savin said quietly, then why are we so afraid to admit that one of them saved my Leopard finally moved, drawing his weapon and pointing it at the communicator in Savin's hand. Enough. The general said, this has gone too far. The council will not allow. I do not care what the council allows. Savin interrupted, and for the first time the air sounded truly royal. I care about truth. I care about honor. And I care about the woman bleeding on the ground, who deserves better than Thiskareth's weapon trembled, but did not fire you. Would start a war with humanity over one ranger. He asked I would burn the Dominion to ash before I let you kill someone who saved my life. Savin replied. And every word was a blade. The standoff held for a heartbeat that felt like eternity. Then Korath made his decision. He pressed the control on his communicator and spoke to his fleet target, the ranger station. He ordered, prepare to fire on my command, General. No. Someone shouted. But Korath was beyond listening. The air has been compromised. He announced to his soldiers, corrupted by human influence. The Council of Elders will understand that this was necessary. Una looked up at the ships overhead, at the weapons powering up, at the small Caloriair standing between her and death with nothing but words and courage. It had been a good life, she thought, and at least she had spent the end of it doing something that mattered. Then the sky split open with new light, and everything changed. The ships came down fast and hard, landing in the clearing beyond the ranger station with a roar of engines that shook the walls and rattled the windows. Una counted 8 Calori warriors emerging from the first shuttle, all of them armed with weapons that glowed with deadly energy. And she knew immediately from their black armor that these were not the Loyalist assassins. Savin whispered from the bed. The Council of Shadows sent their best. Una had already moved to her weapons locker, pulling out the rifle she kept for emergencies and checking its charge with practiced hands. Can you walk? She asked. Savin tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Legs still too weak from the ordeal in the river. I cannot fight. The Calori said with shame in every word. I have never been taught. Royalty is protected, not protecting. Then stay here and stay quiet, Una said. I will handle this. Savin grabbed her arm with clawed fingers that did not scratch this time. There are 8 of them, Pierre said. Elite warriors trained since birth to kill. You cannot possibly win against such odds. Una smiled grimly as she loaded extra charge packs into her belt. Probably not, she said, but I am not going to hand you over to people who want to kill you. So I guess we will see what happens. She moved to the door and then paused, looking back at the small creature wrapped in blankets who wore glowing markings of royalty. Why are you doing this? Savin asked, and the question was the same one as before, but somehow different now. Heavier with meaning. Una thought about it for a moment. Because you were drowning, she said, and I was there. And as far as I am concerned, that has not changed. She slipped out the door before Savin could respond. Night air was cold and the assassins were spreading out in a tactical formation that told Una they knew exactly what they were doing. She moved through the shadows around her station, using terrain she had walked 1,000 times to stay hidden while she planned her defense. The leader of the assassins called out in accented Galactic Common Human Ranger. We know the air is inside. Give them to us and you will not be harmed. Resist and you will die. This is your only warning. Una answered with a shot that took down the warrior on the left flank. And then she was moving before they could track her position. The assassins returned fire, and the night lit up with energy bolts that scorched the trees and blasted chunks from the rocks. But Una was not where they were shooting. She had set traps during her years at this station. Simple things meant for dangerous wildlife. But they worked just as well on Calori warriors who did not know the ground. One assassin fell into a pit and impaled himself on stakes. Another triggered a snare that yanked him into the air where Una shot him before he could cut himself free. 3 down and 5 to go. And Yuna knew her luck would not hold forever. The assassins adapted quickly, moving more carefully now. And one of them managed to flank her position while she was reloading. The energy bolt caught her in the shoulder, and she went down hard, biting back a scream as pain exploded through her body. She rolled behind a boulder and fired back, catching the assassin in the chest. But another bolt hit her leg, and suddenly she could not run anymore. 4 down and 4 to go. And Yuna was bleeding badly from wounds that her medical training told her were serious. She limped toward the station, trying to draw the remaining assassins away from Steven. But they were too smart for that trick. 2 of them circled around to cut her off, while the other 2 headed for the door. And Yuna realized with cold certainty that she was about to fail. She shot one of the warriors, blocking her path, and took another bolt to her side for her trouble. And then she was on the ground with the last nearby assassin standing over her with his weapon pointed at her head. Foolish human, the assassin said, dying for a Kalori who would not have done the same for. Maybe not. Yuna gasped through the pain. But that is not really the point, is it? The assassin snarled and raised his weapon for the killing blow. The blade came out of nowhere, a flash of ceremonial gold that buried itself in the assassin's throat. And the warrior collapsed with a gurgling sound that faded quickly into silence. Evan stood behind the fallen assassin, trembling and wide-eyed and holding a bloody knife that must have been hidden somewhere in those royals. The air's glowing markings were blazing, bright enough to light up the clearing. And Yuna could see tears streaming down the Kalori's feline face. I could not let them kill you, Steven said in a voice that shook with shock and fear. Not after everything you did for me. Yuna tried to stand and failed. So she settled for propping herself against the boulder. The other 2 assassins, she said. Steven looked toward the station where the sounds of combat had gone silent. I do not know. The heirs said they waited in terrible suspense until 2 figures emerged from the station. And Yuna raised her rifle with arms that could barely hold the weight, but the figures were not moving like assassins. They were limping and supporting each other. And when they got closer, Yuna saw the different armor, the loyal colors of the Crown Guard. Your Highness, one of the guards called out, we tracked the assassins here. We feared we were too late. Savan ran to them, and there was a rapid conversation in Kalori that Yuna could not follow. But she caught the tone of relief and joy, and something like awe when the guards looked at her. The human protected you, one guard said in common. A human fought 8 shadow warriors alone. Not alone, Steven said quietly. And the heir looked at the knife still clutched in royal hands, at the blood of the assassin staining that glowing fur. The guards stared at their heir with expressions that Yuna could not read. And then one of them spoke into a communicator in urgent. Kalori. More ships appeared on the horizon, larger ones this time. And Steven's markings flickered with what might have been hope or might have been fear. The Loyalist fleet, the heir said. General Karath is coming. Yuna let her rifle fall and slumped against the boulder, because she had nothing left to give. That is good, right? She asked. That means you are safe. Steven looked at her with those golden eyes, and the expression there was complicated in ways Yuna did not understand. I do not know, the heir said softly. I truly do not know. The ranger station was small and simple, just 4 rooms built from local stone and imported steel. But it was warm and dry, and that was all that mattered right now. Yuna laid the Kalori on her own bed because it was the softest surface in the station, and she wrapped the creature in thermal blankets that hummed with gentle heat. The creature's fur was still wet and cold, and its breathing was shallow, and Yuna knew the signs of hypothermia well enough to be worried. She worked quickly, setting up in 4 line with fluids that she hoped would work on Kalori physiology. And she monitored the creature's vital signs with equipment that beeped and flickered in the dim light. The glowing markings on the Kalori's fur had faded to almost nothing, just a faint shimmer that told Yuna the creature was still alive, but barely holding on. She stayed by the bed for hours, adjusting blankets and checking readings and doing everything her medical training had taught her. And slowly the Kalori began to stabilize. The creature woke near sunset, golden eyes snapping open with sudden alertness, and immediately it tried to leap from the bed. Yuna caught it before it could fall and eased it back down onto the pillows. Easy, she said. You are safe here. No one is going to hurt you, Kalori hissed at her, baring fangs that could tear through bone. And Yuna did not flinch because she had seen worse in her years as a combat medic. You are weak, she said calmly, and if you try to run, you will collapse before you reach the door. So maybe just rest for now, and we can figure out what to do next. The creature stared at her with those alien eyes, and Yuna could see the calculation happening behind them, the weighing of options and outcomes that told her this was no simple child. Who are you? The Kalori finally asked, and its voice was stronger now, more commanding. My name is Yuna Beak, she said. I am a ranger for the human colony, and I am the person who pulled you out of the river before it killed you. Kalori looked away, and Yuna thought she saw something like shame flicker across its feline features. I do not know how to swim, it said quietly, as if confessing a terrible secret that is nothing to be ashamed of. Yuna said, lots of people cannot swim. I can teach you if you want. That Kalori made a sound that might have been a laugh, but sounded more like a cough. You would teach a Kalori to swim, it said. A human would do this for one of us, why not? Yuna said with a shrug. Swimming is useful, and drowning is a bad way to die. She stood and walked to her small kitchen, returning with a bowl of warm broth that she had prepared while the creature slept. I do not know what Kalori eat, she admitted, that this is mostly vegetables and water, so hopefully it will not make you sick. The creature took the bowl with clawed hands that trembled slightly, and it drank the broth without comment while Yuna sat in a chair nearby and watched. Why did you save me? The Kalori asked when the bowl was empty. Yuna considered the question for a moment before answering. Because you were drowning, she said. I was there, and that is really all there is to it. The Kalori shook its head slowly, and the glowing markings on its fur pulsed brighter for a moment. Your people and mine are not friends, it said. We have fought and killed each other, and there are many Kalori who would have let a human drown without a second thought. Yuna nodded because she knew this was true. Maybe so, she said. But I am not many Kalori. I am just me, and I do not let people drown if I can help it. The creature studied her for a long moment, and Yuna had the strange feeling that she was being judged by standards she did not understand. My name is Steven, the Kalori finally said, and I thank you for my life. Yuna smiled because it felt like progress. Nice to meet you, Steven, she said. Now, do you want to tell me why you were in that river? Because Kalori do not usually come to this part of the territory. Before Steven could answer, the communication array in the corner of the room crackled to life with urgent transmissions in the Kalori language. Yuna did not speak Kalori, but she had translation software, and what she heard made her blood run cold. All units mobilize. The transmission said, the bloodline must be found. Failure means extinction of the pride. Search all sectors including human territory. Saban's eyes went wide, and the glowing markings flared bright enough to cast shadows on the walls. They found me, the Kalori whispered. They know I survived. Who found you? Yuna asked. And why are they talking about bloodlines and extinction? Steven looked at her with an expression that mixed fear and resignation in equal measure. I was not entirely honest with you, the Kalori said. I am not a child lost in the wilderness. Yuna waited because she had already guessed this much. I am Steven of the First Pride, the creature continued. Crown heir to the Kalori Dominion, and the river was supposed to be my escape from the people who want me dead. Yuna sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. Well, she said slowly, that explains the glowing for 7 made that coughing laugh sound again. The royal markings, the Kalori said. They appear only in the direct bloodline of the First Pride, And they are why I could never hide among common Calorite. Transmission crackled again with more urgent commands. And Yuna heard coordinates being shared that were getting closer to her station with every passing minute. "Who is hunting you?" she asked. "There was a coup attempt 3 days ago," Steven said. "The Council of Shadows tried to kill me and take the throne. And when I escaped, they blamed my loyal guards and had them executed." Bacalori's voice cracked with grief. "I ran because staying meant death, but I'm small and I cannot fight. And when I tried to cross the river, I thought I would die anyway." Yuna looked at her communication array and then back at the alien royalty sitting in her bed. "The transmissions are coming from 2 different sources," she said, "which means there are 2 groups looking for Yao." Saven nodded grimly. "The loyalists want to protect me," the Calori said, "but the assassins want to finish what they started, and I do not know which group will find me first." Yuna stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky where she could already see the lights of approaching ships. "I think we are about to find out," she said. The morning sun rose over the frontier colony of Vareth 7, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Sergeant Unibeak of home, of Earth, of a world she had not seen in 7 years. She walked along the ridge above the Blackwater Rapids, her boots crunching against the gravel path as she completed her morning patrol. And the sound of the rushing water below filled the air with a constant roar that drowned out almost everything else. Yuna had been a combat medic once, serving in conflicts she preferred not to remember, but those days were behind her now. And she had traded her military uniform for the simple jacket of a wilderness ranger on this distant world where humans and aliens lived in uneasy peace. The Calori were her neighbors here, though neighbor was perhaps too friendly, a word for creatures who had nearly gone to war with humanity just 3 years ago over territorial disputes that had cost lives on both sides. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, standing on 2 legs like humans but covered in spotted fur that resembled earth leopards, with claws that could tear through metal and eyes that glowed in the darkness. They kept to themselves mostly, and Yuna was content to let them, because the Kalari made it very clear that they considered humans to be lesser beings, primitive creatures from a death world who had somehow stumbled into space before they were ready. Yuna did not take it personally, because she had learned long ago that hatred usually came from fear, and the Kalori feared humans for reasons that the history books explained in great detail. She was thinking about breakfast when she heard it, a sound that cut through the roar of the rapids and made her freeze in her tracks. It was a scream, high and desperate, and it came from the river below. Yuna ran without thinking, her body moving before her mind could catch up, and she crashed through the underbrush until she reached the rocky bank where the Blackwater rapids churned and foamed over ancient stones. There in the water she saw a small figure struggling against the current, spotted fur soaked and dragging it down, clawed hands reaching for anything solid and finding nothing. A Kalori. And from its size, Yuna guessed it was young, maybe a child, though she had never been good at judging their ages. The creature went under and came back up coughing, and Yuna could see that it was losing the fight against the river that wanted to swallow it whole. She knew the rules, and she knew them well, because every human on Vareth 7 had been taught that physical contact with a Kalori was considered deeply offensive in their culture, an insult that could spark violence, or worse. She knew that saving this creature could cause a diplomatic incident that would end her career, and maybe her freedom. She knew all of this, and she jumped anyways. The cold hit her like a hammer, driving the breath from her lungs as she plunged into the rapids, and the current immediately tried to pull her under, just as it was doing to the Kalori. Yuna was a strong swimmer, though, trained in waters far more dangerous than these, and she fought her way toward the struggling creature with powerful strokes that her instructors would have been proud of. The Kalori saw her coming, and its golden eyes went wide with something that might have been Hope or might have been horror. But it did not matter because Yuna was already there. She grabbed the creature around the chest and kicked toward the shore, and immediately felt claws rake across her arms as the Calorie panicked and struggled. Against her grip, blood bloomed in the water around them, but Yuna did not let go, because letting go meant death for them both. She fought the current, and she fought the claws, and she fought her own screaming muscles until finally her feet found the bottom, and she dragged them both onto the rocky shore, where they collapsed in a heap of wet fur and torn flesh. The Calorie was not breathing. Yuna did not hesitate, tilting the creature's head back and clearing its airway before pressing her mouth to its muzzle in a way that would probably get her killed. If any other Calorie saw it, she breathed for the creature once, twice, 3 times, and then pressed on its chest with hands that were slick with her own blood. Come on, she thought. Come on. You did not survive that river just to die on dry land. The Calorie convulsed and coughed up water, and then it was breathing on its own, shallow and weak but alive. Definitely Alava. Yuna sat back on her heels and let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. And only then did she notice that her arms were torn in a dozen places, and the rocks beneath her were turning red. She would need to treat herself soon. But first, she looked at the creature she had saved. Really looked at it for the first time. It was small for a Calorie, barely reaching her chest if it stood. And its spotted fur was different from any she had seen before in the 3 years she had lived on this world. Spots seemed to shimmer with a faint light, a bioluminescence that pulsed weakly in time with its breathing. And Yuna had studied enough Calorie culture to know that she had never heard of any Calorie with glowing markings. The creature's eyes fluttered open, golden and slitted and filled with confusion. And for a moment, it just stared at her as if trying to understand what had happened. Then it saw the blood on her arms, and its eyes went wide. You saved me, it whispered in broken Galactic common. And its voice was soft and surprisingly gentle for a species known for their fierce war cries. You were drowning, Yuna said simply, and she reached for the medical kit on her belt that had somehow survived the river. The Calorie tried to sit up and immediately fell back, too weak to move. And Yuna put a hand on its shoulder to keep it still. Do not try to move yet, she said. You almost died, and your body needs time to recover. The creature stared at her hand on its shoulder, and Yuna suddenly remembered the cultural taboo and pulled back quickly. Sorry, she said. I forgot that you do not like to be touched. The Calorie said nothing, just watched her with those strange glowing eyes as she bandaged her own wounds with practiced efficiency. Finally, Yuna stood and looked down at the creature that had nearly cost her life to save. I am going to carry you back to my station, she said. You need warmth and rest and probably food, and you can contact your people from there. The Calorie opened its mouth as if to protest, but no words came out. And Yuna took that as permission. She lifted the creature as gently as she could, cradling it against her chest like she would carry a wounded soldier, and began the long walk back to her ranger station. The Calorie weighed almost nothing, and Yuna wondered again if it was truly a child or if there was something else going on here. Something she did not understand. The glowing markings pulsed against her torn jacket, warm and strange. And Yuna had the sudden feeling that she had done something far more significant than pulling a drowning swimmer from a river. She did not know how right she was.